what we used to do is we said, hey, these are the things that go into being healthy. We should have a seminar on nutrition. We should have one on heart health. We should have one on exercise. And we went through the list. And then we went out and we found conventional experts in those fields who came in and talked to our patients about it. But here's what we noticed, was that since some of the experts that came in, they had a very conventional lens, which where they saw health, and our patients a lot of times did not share that lens. So sometimes those views didn't always match up. And then we had a really cool experience take place where one of our staff members went to Africa on a mission trip and heard a story about a nonprofit who was doing something really unique there. Traditionally what they do when they go into areas that need help was we take and we go to an area that needs food, for instance. Let's say we go to Africa and there are some starving people there. We take our way of doing things over there and we drop it on them and we say, here's how you do it. And kind of like, here's how you do it, dummy. Right? We do that, and then we leave, and we come back the next year. We can't believe that they're not doing what we told them to do. Like, what the heck's that? And we realize that we're trying to impose our values and things like that on them. It doesn't work, right? And this nonprofit was doing something really cool. They were going into these villages, and they were finding people who were already doing it successfully. And they had them become the leader, and they promoted them, and they helped them show the other people how they were doing it. And then they noticed that people were able to grow their own food, they were able to birth their own babies, take care of their own kids, and all this kind of stuff, which was really cool. And so we were inspired by that, and we decided, what if instead of just bringing in people who do this for a living, what if we brought in people who have done it successfully? For instance, next month our topic is cancer, and the person who's going to come and speak is not an oncologist, it's somebody who had cancer twice and now doesn't have cancer anymore, and she's going to talk to you about how she did that, because it wasn't through conventional means. And so tonight, you get the very significant pleasure of hearing from my wife, and I want to tell you a little bit about her if I can. So I came from a family where I had 6 siblings, and all 7 of us were born at home. I'm the oldest, and so when I was born, there was a midwife there. But for the other 6, it was just my mom and my dad, and me sometimes. And that was it. So I grew up like that, which is weird, right? It didn't seem weird at the time, but it's weird now. And but I grew up like that, so my thought was like, we're not having babies in the hospital. That's crazy, right? The way that most people think of my story. And I met my wife, and she came from a very different background. And but one of the things, the only thing I had going for me was I knew that how and where we had our baby was not going to be my decision. Right? I was cool with that. But I really was hoping to have it be as least invasive a process as possible. And my wife, coming from that background, she's an analytical person. You'll see a little bit of this tonight. And she was not going to take my word for it or my ideas without looking into it. She went and she researched a lot of what goes into this and has continued to since then, and decided that the way that we wanted to do things was the way we ended up doing them. But because of that, 3 kids later, 3 really wonderful, beautiful births later, this is the thing I think that she's most passionate about in the whole world. And so she was the person that I wanted to share with you tonight about like a different perspective on birth and pregnancy in general. And so if you would be so kind as to give a very warm welcome to my wife, Erin.
So you might see a little curly blonde head running around a little bit tonight. That's Henry, our 3-year-old, and he joined us tonight because he has sniffles and he didn't want to stay home. So he's here tonight. So welcome and thanks for coming to talk about birth and a little bit about pregnancy too. Can you guys hear me in the back? Am I loud enough? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So I think that birth has gotten a really bad rap. I ended up having our 3 kids at home with the midwife. Not necessarily because I was a really big advocate for home birth or really excited about home birth even when we started out, but just because I had heard one epidural horror story that I won't share tonight because this isn't a night for horror stories, but I heard one that made me think, I don't want one of those, but I'm not tough, and so I don't know what else to do other than to have my babies in a place where that's not an option. And then it turns out that I'm tough. And that made me really happy. I've never before thought that I was a very tough person. I've never really had that much confidence in my physical abilities because I was never athletic. I never ran marathons well, I've never sought out anything that was difficult. I really only run if I'm being chased. And it was shocking to me that I could give birth, that I could do this really tough thing, and that I could do it without medication. And I could do it in a way that didn't scare me, but left me feeling really powerful when it was done. And I wondered why nobody else feels that way about birth. And so I started really putting a lot of thought into that, and I've spent the last few years thinking about it and talking to my pregnant friends about my perceptions of birth, having been through it 3 times, and where I think the fear and the drama comes from. And so there's a lot of drama surrounding birth. I think it comes from 3 sources. We're going to talk a little bit about each of those. The first one is how the media portrays birth. You guys ever watch TV, sitcoms, movies? Is it ever calm or quiet? is anybody ever looking or feeling empowered in a media birth? Not really. Somebody's always giving birth in an elevator, in a car, and I mean, sometimes those things happen, but there's always a lot of running around and screaming and drama and doctors saving the day and women hating their husbands. I just don't think that birth always has to be like that. But when we think of birth, and drama does sell, drama really sells, this is the kind of stuff that we are exposed to. And Aaron, earmuffs, we didn't think we'd have a child here tonight, so apologies in advance for the language, but this is what birth in the media looks like.
What are you doing? Go away from me. Honey, I'm so proud of you and I love you so much.
I hate you! You did this to me, you miserable piece of dick-brain, horseshit, slime-sucking son of a whore bitch!
That's perfect, sweetheart. I got it all on film. The kids are gonna love it. Maybe I'll put it in the car.
Get out! Get out!
That's kind of what we're exposed to when it comes to birth. And my apologies, I know those of you in the back probably couldn't hear it, but suffice it to say it was a tirade and there was a lot of bad words in there. The reality is, I don't think that most women hate their husbands. In general, I don't think we hate our husbands. I think we really don't hate them when we're giving birth. I think when I was in labor was the time that Aaron and I were probably the closest. I had a doula there, and the only person in the world that I wanted was Aaron, and I never once punched him in the face. And the reality is, you're not going to waste your strength on punching somebody. You're busy. You're birthing a baby. You're not punching anybody. And you're going to be fierce when you're giving birth, but you're not going to be insane. And there's a difference between the two. And I feel like the media portrays women giving birth as insane people. And that's not what we are. We're just fierce, and there's a very distinct difference. The next thing, and I know this is going to get a little tender as we talk about this, but the next thing that I think really creates drama for us is other women's stories. I couldn't believe how frequently when I had this, big belly out in front of me, people would walk up to me and say, "Oh, you're pregnant. My birth was so horrible. Let me tell you about it." I'm like, okay, thanks. I don't think I needed that right now. I think if you're one of the women in the room that had a birth that didn't go quite the way you want it to, always ask yourself, what is my intention with telling this story? If the intention is to get some attention, or to be defensive because she's told you she's going to birth one way and you want to tell her about a different way. Even if your intention is just to try and heal your hurts through storytelling, maybe that pregnant woman isn't the best place for that story to be told. If you're trying to scare your fellow woman, I just don't think that's right. I really feel like we should be banding together a little bit more than that and some solidarity, because the reality is that most of us at some point are probably going to be pregnant, and they come out eventually, so we're going to give birth. And I think that trying to horrify and scare someone with your story it's just mean. So maybe take that story somewhere else, but not to that lady. I think, every kid's going to go to middle school at some point, and I can't imagine walking up to every kid that's about to enter middle school and telling them, "Oh, you're going to middle school? It sucks. It's horrible." And it is. I don't know anybody that likes middle school. I hated middle school. But we don't walk up to those kids and fill them full of stories about bullying and the acne they're going to get and the fact that they'll probably get braces and glasses in the same year, because why wouldn't it happen that way? But we don't need to walk up to every kid and tell them that, just like we don't need to walk up to every pregnant woman and start telling her, "Hey, do you know how crazy you're going to be and how awful it's going to be?" Because the truth is, it's not really like that. So pregnant moms, I'm not saying that, that your friends that have told you their horror story are bad people. They're not. We're all a little bit hurt, and we're all a little bit broken. We're part of, we're humans, and that's part of the human experience. So, we can approach it with a little bit of compassion and a little bit of grace for our fellow a woman, but we can also just kind of let the story wash over us and not internalize it, because her story isn't our story. You know, if you're pregnant, you're still writing your story. You have no idea what it's going to be. So let that wash over you as best you can and not internalize it. So the third thing that I think sells us the story of birth as drama is the money. When you follow the money trail and look at where does this fear of birth come from, I think it's pretty easy to see. This is the cost of birth broken down by facility in the United States. This on the far left, coming in at $2,200, is a vaginal birth in a birth center. So a birth center means you're not having an epidural, you're not having a C-section, you're not having those kinds of interventions. The exact same birth in a hospital birth, no complications, comes in at 4 times as much. And it's the same birth. This figure is assuming that you don't have an epidural, Pitocin, forceps, any of that stuff, and it's certainly assuming that you're not having a C-section, which is where you get more into. At this time, in 2009 to 2011, when they did this, it was 24,000. Now it's up to 30,000. So in the last few years, it's gone up exponentially. I mean, I think we all see healthcare costs going up quite a bit. But we're talking about, you know, the difference of the same 2 births here, just in a different location, and it's already 4 times different. So it behooves the hospital system to get women in there to have their babies, even if it's a healthy birth, you know, a generally easy birth. It makes a lot of money. There's not as much money in women having their babies at home or at birth centers where the figure comes in more like this. The other thing that you'll see, you know, in a birth center birth, or really in any other industrialized country, is a flat rate for a birth. Here it's an itemized cost basis. So each thing, I mean, they come and give you a new pillowcase and there's a charge for it on your hospital bill. That's a joke, that's not true. But you know, we see these things add up, and so there's money in making sure that more and more things get added to the list. We're going to watch just a short little clip about that, and I hope you'll be able to hear it.
The $15,000 birth of the Prince George was, by UK standards, a pricey one, but that's still only half of the average birth cost in the US. The UK average of just under $2,700 was eclipsed as a result of the Duchess choosing to deliver in the Lindo wing of St. Mary's, where her husband was born. Perks there include a private suite, internet access, satellite TV, a choice of daily paper, dedicated chefs, and in-room wine service. So, wow, what does double the money buy you in the US? That's part of the problem. As each item and service is priced and billed separately, nobody's entirely sure. Flat fees are the norm in other developed countries, but the practice in the US is to itemize expenses. Rooms, doctors, birthing tubs, and even placenta removal can all result in additional and often unexpected charges. Charging a lump sum began to fall out of favor among hospitals in the US about 20 years ago. The $30,000 average was estimated by a Truven Analytics report, which investigated the cost of having a baby in America.
I'm not going to show you videos all night, but there were just a few that I think highlight things even better than I could. We'll talk about how the itemized treatments start adding up, because you might go into the hospital thinking, okay, I'm going to have, you know, a birth one way, this is my birth plan, this is what I'm going to do, and then it quickly devolves into something different. It's called the cascade of interventions, and Business of Being Born had a really nice graphic that explains it. So
this feeling at the hospital where there's like a limit to how long you can be in labor, like, oh, it's been 12 hours, so now you need Pitocin.
Oh, I did know the pressure was on. You know, as we got into like 20 hours, 21 hours.
At the hospital, I had Pitocin, and then that made me itchy, so they give you something else for your itching.
I knew once they gave you that Pitocin, you need the epidural.
Feel better now that you have your epidural?
Oh my God, yes.
And then things come on really strong, so then you get an epidural.
And if you're uncomfortable, we can always give you more.
It was very easy for them to start doing things that we hadn't really wanted them to do, like Pitocin and whatnot, because I already had the IV in my arm.
They don't really give you the option, you know.
And then another epidural, because nothing was happening.
You're having a contraction right now.
I don't feel the pain.
Automatically, they were like, oh, you need an epidural, we'll get the anesthesiologist.
So she's getting her epidural, then we'll put in the Foley bulb for induction.
They gave me another drug called Stadol.
17 hours of Pitocin.
They gave me that, and I remember that made me, I was like, what's going on? What's going on? There's something wrong.
Cervidil is the end. Once Cervidil happened, any chance beyond that was gone. it was gone.
I hated that drug.
You know, it seemed to me that once they started an intervention, they all just kind of, it was a domino effect.
The whole thing is like a big snowball effect.
In the hospital, you're not allowed to have very long labors. So if you're not dilating rapidly, which you're likely not to do if you get an epidural early in labor, you will be given Pitocin. They'll put the Pitocin in the IV. It will flow into your veins. Pitocin makes contractions longer and stronger and closer together. So then the pain of labor is much worse. So you go with that for a while because you have the epidural, but eventually the pain of the contractions is overwhelming the epidural. You need to up the epidural, and then labor slows down more because of that, so then you need more Pitocin. Now you're not feeling the pain of the extra Pitocin because you've got the epidural, but your baby is getting compressed blood and oxygen supply because Pitocin contractions last so long and are so strong, the blood and oxygen flow to the baby is compromised. So then the baby's likely to go into distress, and then you're sent off for an emergency cesarean from a baby in distress from contractions induced by the Pitocin, which was necessitated by the epidural.
Step by step, one intervention leads to a series of interventions. And the net result is the mother finally ends up with a cesarean, and everybody says, thank God we were able to do all those interventions to save your baby. The fact of the matter is, if they didn't start the cascade of interventions, none of that would have been necessary.
I'm sorry, I'm sure there are plenty of you that can't hear it. So in a nutshell, cascade of interventions, more Pitocin leads to more epidural, leads to more Pitocin, leads to, increasing the epidural until, what can often happen is baby is being compressed for so long and so hard by Pitocin-induced contractions rather than oxytocin, which is what your brain naturally makes in labor. Those oxytocin contractions, they don't last as long, they're not as strong, so your baby isn't getting compressed during a contraction for such a long period of time and not quite as hard. With the Pitocin contractions, because they're being compressed that long, they start, having decreased oxygen flow, you start seeing their heart rate fluctuate and do different things, and then, then it's C-section city. And we hear a lot of stories, you're like, well, I needed an emergency C-section, and so thank God I was at a hospital. And sometimes I think that's true, and sometimes there are C-sections that need to happen. But I really think that more often than not, what we're seeing is C-sections that are happening as a result of this cascade of interventions. If we hadn't screwed with it in the first place, we probably wouldn't have needed a C-section. And C-sections are, they're hospital friendly, they're quick, and everybody gets out of there really fast, and they're really pricey. So there is, there's an interest in, a vested interest, I think, in having C-sections. But to be clear, I'm not anti-hospital. There's a time and a place, and there are home births that end up transferring to a hospital, and I'm all in favor of that happening when it needs to happen, because if you are in a high-risk situation, there's no better place to be than a hospital. When you're in a low-risk situation, actually the data says, the British Medical Journal came out with this last year, the data says that low-risk women in low-risk pregnancies are much better to happen in a setting outside of the hospital. You see less intervention and less complication in the birth. We did not see that study get published in any U.S. medical journals. But this cascade of interventions, like I said before, that's what led me to home birth, and that's what led me to start looking into this. I would really like to just, I guess, repeat that I'm not anti-hospital, but I do believe that convincing you that you're not enough, or that somehow your body is not enough, it pays, because there really isn't any money in empowering women. There isn't any money in making us think that we can do great things. There is a lot of money in making us think that we're broken and we need fixing. All right, so what do I think facilitates an empowering birth? I think the first thing is it starts during pregnancy. It starts, with doing your research during pregnancy, knowing what matters to you, what means something to you, getting in touch with women who have similar values to yours, and forming a support network of those women. And starting it early, because I think starting your birth support network at 36 or 37 weeks isn't enough. Start it soon so that you have a lot of time to start cultivating those friendships and hearing good stories. Know that you're not sick. That's part of the empowering part, I think, is knowing that we don't have a dangerous medical condition. We have a pregnancy. We have something joyous, and that sometimes makes you sick, or it can bring on some things that are a little, unpleasant, but that doesn't mean that you're sick. Your body is doing what it needs to do to grow your baby. You don't have a dangerous condition. Surround yourself with your dream team, with, a team of friends and, and a partner and a doula and a care provider who will all make you feel really confident and really comfortable. If you don't like who you picked for a provider, change it. That's fine. You could be 39 weeks pregnant. You don't feel good about who's delivering your baby, you change your mind. You go find somebody that you're comfortable with. I had my friend who actually, introduced me to home birth in the first place started out in a hospital with an OB, didn't like what she saw, and at 32 weeks, she went and found a midwife group. I delivered with a midwife with my first son, who I chose not to use for my next 2 births. So it's not that it's always that, doctors are bad and midwives are good. There's different types of midwives out there, and I didn't care for the first one, so I changed. I didn't owe it to that provider from my first pregnancy to give her my next 2 babies. So seek out positive birth stories. Believe it or not, you have to actively seek those out, because little old ladies will come up to you in the grocery store and tell you terrible things. So seek out those positive birth stories, and we'll talk more later about some places where I think you can find those. Do some birth affirmations. I'm actually going to send you home with some tonight, should you want to take them with you. But affirmations are things that you tell yourself that pump you up. I know we have a family affirmation that we do every morning with the kids. Have a list of birth affirmations, things like, my body made this baby, my body knows how to birth this baby. Things like that, reminding yourself of those things daily. What you tell your brain, your body will eventually start to believe. Take a good birth class. We'll talk a little bit more about that tonight, but a hypnobirthing class, a Bradley method class, those are some really good options, but find a birth class that you like. I think a lot of you can even do like online now through video series, but there's really good resources around here for that. And then use social media to your advantage and not your detriment. I think we all know what happens when we put a little statement out there on Facebook that we think is pretty simple and innocuous, and all of a sudden we have 52 comments with 52 people's advice based on that comment. So, be discreet as needed on Facebook, and if you put it out there, just know you might get a lot of advice in return. So first thing, I think when it comes to figuring out where or how your birth is going to go is figuring out who's your location and your provider going to be. This choice needs to leave you feeling confident because there is an anatomy to safety. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. This thing that you're going to do, it's primal, and it's something that every mammal does, and it's something that every woman has done since the beginning of time. It is primal. And we see animals, like if a zebra is out in the savannah and is birthing her little zebra baby, she could be fully dilated, zebra baby's on its way out, and a lion enters the savannah, and she will stop labor, stop giving birth, not because she consciously said, oh, I should stop, but because her body literally shut down because it saw this lion coming. And our bodies will do similar things. You see people in hospitals, or in home settings too. Like if you don't feel like you're in a safe place, if you don't feel like things are going well in your mind, your body will react to that fight or flight response and go, oh, it's not safe to have a baby? Okay, let's stop labor. Generally, you're not, in danger of a lion or anything else out in the savannah. The hospital's probably not on fire. Your home's probably not on fire. But if you think that you're unsafe, your body's going to respond by not letting your baby come out into an unsafe place. So make sure that, the person that you're choosing and the location that you're choosing makes you feel safe because your birth is going to follow. I think this needs to be a decision that you make, ladies, and I think it needs to be a decision that your partners support. And I have friends whose husbands have said, no, you can't do it that way because I'm not comfortable with it, so we're going to do it this way. And I have a really big problem with that, not because I think that, husbands or partners shouldn't be involved in the process, but because it's her body and it's her lady parts that somebody's going to be looking at and touching, And if we think that a woman should have some say over that if it's a frat party, I think that she should have say over that if it's her birth. It's a personal thing who's going to be down there dealing with your business. And you need to feel comfortable with that person, and you need to feel comfortable with that location. So guys, as uncomfortable I know as this subject can be, I would just want to call on you to support your woman because it is a really vulnerable time, and you want to feel really safe with that person in that location that you choose. I can't say enough good things about doulas. Get a doula. Just get a doula. It's that simple. Get a doula. Or if you have a friend that you think would make a really excellent doula, because you can't afford a doula, ask that friend. But have somebody there, because your partner is going to want to be busy loving you, giving you encouragement, doing things for you. So you might need somebody else to act as your advocate to make sure that your birth plan requests are being met, or to make sure that your partner has drinks of water and snacks and gets to go to the bathroom every once in a while. So have a doula there. It's really helpful. If you've got fear, I think address where the fear comes from. Is it based in reason and logic, or is it based in some of those dramatic things that we talked about before? I think really assess where that fear is coming from. And know your hospitals. Not all hospitals are created equal. Not all doctors are created equal. Not all midwives are created equal. So do your research a little bit when you're looking at if you are looking at a hospital birth, just know which ones in the area have policies that you are okay with and that you aren't. I know one local hospital that across the board, every woman gets a Pitocin drip after birth to prevent postpartum hemorrhage, even if you weren't really a hemorrhage risk. I think that's a little bit nuts. So just know your hospitals, ask what the policies are, ask a lot of questions of your doctor. If you still don't feel like they're getting answered, call the nurse manager on the floor, try and figure out who can answer your questions for you. This one's a little awkward, but this person is my friend. This OB has been, a friend of my family for, 30 years, but my friend is a labor and delivery nurse at such and such hospital. And that's valid. If you want to go to the place where your friends are, great, please go there. But if you feel pressured into it, if they're your friend and you love them, that's fine. Take them out to dinner, go shopping, but you don't have to give them your baby. That's not a rule. So if it's a person that's a friend of the family, as awkward as I know that can get, you don't owe it to them to have them deliver your baby, or to be your nurse at your birth, or to be your midwife. Like I said, I didn't use my first midwife for my next two. And then, can this person relate to me? This was really important to me. It might not be important to everybody, but 65% of OBs are men, and they're never going to know what this feels like, and they've never had it happen before.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
I loved having a female provider, and you might find a male provider that you think is wonderful, but just a quick little story. When I was giving birth to Henry, the little guy that's back there right now, it was going so much faster than my birth with Sam, and I think I just didn't even necessarily know what was happening. But my midwife said, do you want to push? And she hadn't checked me or anything, and I don't know. And she said, you can try, you can give it a little push and see what you think. And so I gave it a little push, and my water broke, and he crowned, and then 3 contractions later, there he was. And I asked my midwife, how did you know that I should push? You hadn't checked me. And she said, oh, I knew that sound. She said, that's the sound that I would always make. She said, you changed from, deep, even breath to just like the slightest bit of grunting. And she said, you started clasping onto Aaron's hands tighter. And she said, I just figured that meant it was time to push. And it was really neat to have this person there who was listening to my body and paying attention in a way that she only could because she'd been there. She'd had 2 kids herself. She knew what was going on with me. And it was a really beautiful thing not to have to turn over at that point and put my legs up and have somebody check me, that she just knew where I was and said, hey, just go for it. So having somebody that could relate to what I was going through was a really beautiful thing for me. I know it's not important to everyone, but to me it was really valuable. The next thing is having a birth plan. And I actually have some birth plans here for you today, just some sample birth plans. I'm not clever enough that I made this birth plan myself. It is from the website, and I know this sounds a little funny. Earth Mama Angel Baby. But
She's gonna have the best stuff.
they really do. It's an incredible site. So that is where this birth plan came from. You can actually fill it out there online. I'm just handing it out tonight just because we'll go through a couple little notes on it. But I would encourage you to go to her site and do the birth plan there, because then she'll send you it in a really lovely layout that is easy for everybody on your birth team to read. And she just has other great stuff there. So you can thank her for this outline of a birth plan that gives you all the things that you could even possibly imagine to think about surrounding birth. Sometimes it might even seem a little redundant, but the ones that make you repeat yourself, it's because they're the most important ones. So go through it and enjoy it. Sarah, can I get actually one of those for you? Thanks. So create it with your partner. I know earlier I said, your partner just needs to support you, and they do. But create the birth plan together, and make sure that you both like it and you feel good about it, and talk through all of these things beforehand, because you're not going to want to talk through these things while you're in labor. So make sure that you guys have talked about them together beforehand. And then once you're done with it, communicate it to your whole birth team. That's, your doula, your doctor or midwife. Bring it to the hospital. If mom's coming, or mother-in-law, or sister, give everybody a copy of it so everybody knows, hey, if I'm saying I can't do it anymore, I don't want you to say, you're right, we should get you an epidural. So make sure that everybody is on the same page about that. So we're just going to go over just a little bit of details about this beforehand, or right now rather. So I said that because it says before labor begins. So even starting to think about some of the things that are going to lead up to your labor starting, have it written down. What are the things that you want? Do you want your provider to strip your membranes during an exam? Because believe it or not, there are stories of people having had that done to them without them asking for it. So be really clear about what it is you want. When somebody's down there and you can't see what's happening, be clear about what it is that you expect to happen during that exam. There are different ways to induce, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. So think about, what are the things that I'm okay with and what things have gone too far, and be clear about that beforehand. Think about your environment, what kind of pain relief methods you might be okay with. That doesn't just mean drugs. Do you want a birth tub? Do you want specific kinds of massage? I think at the second stage of labor, that's when you're starting to push your baby out. Be thinking about, are there things that you do and do not want during that time? How do you feel about an episiotomy? Do you want to have a cut made down there, or would you rather just wait and see if you tear or not? I can tell you from experience, tearing isn't the worst thing that's ever going to happen to you. It's fine. Like, you've got so much other stuff going on, you barely even know what's happening. It actually, the possibility of you tearing goes down quite a bit if you're in a birth tub, so maybe be thinking about that, and being in warm water can really help with that. And then thinking about the delivery. Who do you want to catch your baby? Did you know that there are options? Our midwife delivered Sam, but Aaron delivered our next two. He left my hands and somebody else took over, and he went and delivered our other two, and it was a really wonderful moment for him to get to be the first one to touch those babies. And then, what do you want to happen if there's a cesarean? What would your wishes be? And then, did you know there's a third stage of labor? After that baby comes out, what are the kinds of things that you want to have happen? And we're going to talk about some of those a little bit later in the talk, too. And then what things you would want done with your newborn afterward, because there are going to be a lot of options for things they can do for your baby after it's born. And some of them you might be okay with, and some of them you might not. So it's really good to know what the norm is, what your facility or what your midwife is going to do, unless you give them a different plan. Because the absence of your plan means that you're on somebody else's plan. So it would really be good to A, know what their plan is, and B, know what your plan is and communicate it. And I'm going to tell you, at a big hospital system, and again, it's not that they're the enemy, but the plan there is written by a team of MBAs and risk management lawyers. It's really not written by a team of doctors and nurses. I have two friends that work in a hospital system and are really bummed about some of the things they see, and they say, I don't have any power to change it because I'm not the policy maker. And so it might be that you want one thing, your nurse wants one thing, your doctor wants one thing, but the policy states that something else has to happen. Those policies are usually written for the hospital to avoid litigation, not to give you your best experience. So just know that when you enter into that environment, there are procedures that, even your really wonderful nurse who is just the most loving person in the world, and even your really competent doctor can't do much to fight, because if the hospital policy says you get Pitocin at this time, that's a pretty hard thing to fight. So have a plan and let everybody know your plan. So we're going to take a little sidetrack to induction town here, because I think that's a really important thing to talk about. So do your research about what the different induction methods are, and then be very, very clear about what your expectations are. They're going to try to induce you if you go anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks over. 2 weeks seems to be kind of the cutoff, but I know several people who at 1 week they said, I don't know, you look pretty big, so we should just induce you now. Due dates are not an exact science. Do you know the percentage of babies that are born on their due date? 4%. 4% of babies are born on their due date. The other 96% are born somewhere else in the spectrum of pregnancy. So don't count on that date. And I kind of hated to even know what my due date was with my kids, because I was so attached to that day. And with Sam, he was born the day before, and it was glorious and wonderful. And the next ones were only 4 and 3 days overdue, but I just expected them to come sooner because Sam did, and I was really unbearable to be around, I think. Aaron can probably attest to that. So I can't imagine if they had been 2 weeks late, I would have been a nightmare. But if your baby isn't here, know that there's a good chance it's because her lungs aren't ready yet. They don't know exactly what it is that makes labor start. There's, some back and forth, some research that's suggesting different things, but the most compelling research I've heard so far is that they think maybe the baby's lungs, when they start producing surfactant and that they're going to be ready to start breathing on their own, that's what triggers mom to start producing oxytocin and for labor to start. So there's something in your baby. We're not, I know we think we're so smart. We have a lot of science out there, but there's still a lot we haven't figured out. And we haven't quite figured out the miracle of what makes that baby done cooking and mom get it out of her all at just the right time. So the jury's still out on that one, but know that because we don't understand it well is probably all the more reason not to screw with it too much. There are natural strategies for getting labor going, and those are here in your birth packet. I won't go over all of them. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, and I tend to think if those don't work, maybe your baby needs to cook a little. You don't want a medium rare baby. You want that baby well done. So if it does come to a hospital induction, the two, kind of the two warring induction methods you see at a hospital are Pitocin, which is a drug that mimics oxytocin. Your body produces oxytocin, and that makes your uterus contract. And then there's Pitocin, which is just a synthetic version of oxytocin. But here's the rub. Oxytocin has a double job to do. It not only makes your uterus contract, it makes your brain start releasing endorphins. Endorphins help you deal with pain. Pitocin only makes your uterus contract. You don't get that same amount of endorphins that you get with oxytocin. So think about that one. There's a really natural and beautiful balance that happens when we have oxytocin, both making us, making our labor get stronger and longer and more powerful and ultimately more successful. It's also giving our brains what they need to endure that. And I can tell you, with all of my labors, there is a point at which I stop remembering what's going on. I told Marina, I think I enter into like my monkey brain. I have my thinking brain that's like, this is taking too long. What if it keeps going all day? What if I'm in labor forever? And then there's a point at which my monkey brain takes over, and monkey brain doesn't know what time it is. Monkey brain doesn't care what time it is, and monkey brain is a wonderful thing. And I really think that what turns that on is those endorphins. You want that monkey brain. It serves you very well. There's another induction strategy called a Foley. So when you're starting to think, about what the things are that you might want, they might be mentioning these things to you. I mean, somebody's going to tell you what these things are, but if you're in labor, you're not really listening. So kind of know what these things are beforehand. A Foley is a small, catheter balloon thing that they insert into your cervix and blow up the balloon, and it opens up your cervix. I hear different stories from different women. I didn't have either of them, but one is a pretty serious chemical, and the other isn't. So just something to think about. And then know what your rights are. Your hospital might have a policy. We give Pitocin if you haven't dilated X amount of centimeters in X amount of hours. Know what their procedure are, but know what your rights are, because chances are if you don't sign off on stuff, they shouldn't be doing it. But you're also not really in a position to decide if you want to sign off on stuff or not, because you're pretty vulnerable. So have a birth advocate. Have a doula or a partner or a really good friend or somebody that's there to advocate, for your rights in whatever setting you're in, to make sure that you're getting the birth that you want. Obviously within reason. And there are emergencies sometimes, but there are just fewer than we think there are. There are fewer than we're led to believe we are. Okay, so the baby's out. Oh, sigh of relief. Immediately following birth, these are some things that I think you want to think about putting in your birth plan and thinking about. Having skin-to-skin contact with that baby right after it's born. Everything's new. Everything's scary. They were in a uterus for their entire life, and now they're on the outside where the temperature is weird, and the smells are weird, and the sounds are weird. They love skin-to-skin with you. It calms them down. It sets their heart rate back to normal. It helps their breathing to normalize, and they get exposed to some good bacteria. And then we always think about not wanting babies to get dirty, but they need to get exposed to a little bit of your normal flora, and this is a really good way to get that started, is by having them right against your skin. I have some pictures up here that I don't know if you can see. I don't have it set to zoom. But this first one is Aaron and I right after Finn is born, and maybe you can see at the bottom of the screen there's a stethoscope, because they're actually doing his newborn stats while he's laying on my chest. And it doesn't matter what atmosphere you're in. If you had a baby at home or a birth center or a hospital, ask for that. Ask for that skin-to-skin time, and for babies' vitals to either be delayed for a little bit or to happen while they're on your chest, because they can listen to hearts and lungs and all those things while your baby is resting comfortably on your chest. I think, and as far as skin-to-skin goes, it doesn't have to be just mom. Dads and babies love that bonding time too. I was getting out of the birth tub at this point and, getting into a robe, getting into my bed. Somebody needed to hold the baby. Why not dad with, his chest bared and the baby getting to, you also get exposed to a little bit different bacteria, but start bonding with dad, and it's a really valuable thing. Delayed cord clamping. There's like a tendency to just hurry up and get everything done. Their cord will keep pulsating after they're born, and it can keep pulsating for a while, and the entire duration of that time that it's pulsating, that baby's still getting blood from mom. And they need it. It has oxygen, it has antibodies, it has nutrients, it has things that babies need. So keep that cord going until it's done pulsating. When it's done pulsating, that means baby's gotten what he or she needs. So ask for delayed cord clamping until the pulsating is stopped. Everybody's going to know what that means. I think we suction babies too much. Sometimes I think that their toenails are going to get suctioned out of them. They won't. But I think, why do we suction them quite that much? If you guys drink something and it goes down the wrong tube, so to speak, do you cough? Yeah, and babies are going to get fluid out of their lungs. I mean, there are cases, of course, where things aren't going well, but for the most part, babies are made with the same kind of reflexes we are to kind of, cry, squawk, do a little cough, something to get that out. We don't need to, be quite as forceful with the suction as we generally are. There are cases where it's not, but I think asking for, light suction to no suction is a really reasonable thing to ask for your baby. And I think it's okay to ask that they don't be vigorously toweled as soon as they're born. I see a lot of this, let's get them out. They don't need that. They have brand new skin that's never even seen the light of day before. Be easy on them. And no separation from mom unless there's an emergency. They don't need to go off to the nursery to have a bath, and they don't need to go have their testing done in another room unless there's an emergency. Keep that baby with you. They love you. They want to be with you. You're the only familiar thing to them at this point. So be together as much as you can. Nurse that baby. Nurse that baby as fast as you can. It's really good for them to start latching right away. A lot of newborns, you'll see them come out and be climbing their hands, not their whole body, they're not that strong usually, but climbing their little hands up their mom to get to her breast because they know that that's where they're supposed to be. And it's a really beautiful bonding experience to start nursing them as soon as you can, if the situation allows. I don't think they need a bath right away. They're not actually that dirty. And that vernix that's on them, that kind of white stuff, some babies have more of it, some babies have less. Our first two didn't have much. Our third one was just covered with vernix. It's the thing that's been separating their skin from amniotic fluid and protecting it for a while, and it's still got a lot of good stuff in it that can help protect them. So, you know, kind of massage it into them and leave them be. It's really, really good for their skin. I wonder if we would see so many skin conditions and eczema, different things with kids if we didn't strip them of their vernix so fast. It's there for a reason. And then there's you know, 3 pretty big things they're going to ask you about after your baby's born. Do you want antibiotic ointment in their eyes? Do you want them to have a vitamin K shot? And do you want them to have a hepatitis B vaccine? You know, these are personal decisions. The antibiotic ointment for the eyes, if you're group B strep negative, negative for chlamydia, and negative for gonorrhea, the necessity for these eye antibiotics goes down quite a bit. So you can talk to your care provider about that. Those are things that you can get, you know, routinely screened for during pregnancy. I chose to do the group B strep screening with each of my pregnancies because even if I came back positive, I didn't know if I would necessarily want to do antibiotics for it, but I would want to know if there were some natural ways that I could get rid of group B strep before my baby was born. It's a pretty easy test, but if you're testing negative for all these things, you know, think about whether or not you really think your baby needs eye antibiotics and make that decision with your care provider. Vitamin K, they give your baby in case of newborn hemorrhaging. It's generally done in an injection. You can do oral vitamin K. I don't know if every hospital has it standard. I know my midwife did, and you know others do. You could probably even bring your own, purchase your own oral vitamin K. You know, there's a lot of conflicting information about whether or not babies really need vitamin K. I tend to err on the side of if they're born with low vitamin K levels, maybe it's for a reason. But at the same time, you know, I know that the idea of a hemorrhage is really scary. So, you know, I have no judgments or preferences about that for you all. I mean, obviously, I don't have any preferences for you guys. It's your birth. But that's just something to talk about with your care provider and to know that there's an oral version of it available that doesn't have all the stabilizers that an injection does. The hepatitis B vaccine they want to give your baby in the first 1 to 2 days of life. Hepatitis B is a blood-borne illness. You get it through sex, through needles, through coming into contact with other people's contaminated body fluids. I don't think that very many newborns are in the position where they really need that hepatitis B vaccine. But they give it at birth nonetheless, unless it's something that you decline. One of my friends, you know, declined hers at the hospital, and they were really persistent about it. And her mom finally said, "Why now? Like, if it's a bloodborne illness, why now?" And they said, "Well, because you're here." That wasn't a good enough reason for me. So just, you know, really think about that and talk about that with your care provider. Why then? And then get that baby checked. Get them checked by a chiropractor. 85% of babies are born with a misalignment of their atlas, that bone right at the very top of your neck, at the base of your skull, that touches your brainstem, and everything really important about, you know, being a functioning mammal happens in your brainstem, your respiration, your heart rate. 85% of them are born with a misalignment there. Our Finn, this is him getting adjusted by Aaron the day he was born. He presented so weird. He came out with this part of his forehead first, and that poor thing, like, his head was shaped like this. Like, one feature on every side was like an inch higher than the other. And I was like, oh my God, what did we do? He doesn't look like that now. He looks really good. But he just came out at a strange angle, and he came out lightning fast. He was my third one, so I don't think he even had time to move his head to where it needed to be. But he, as a result, had something called torticollis. His head was, you know, cocked off to one side. He didn't want to turn it. He only wanted to nurse on one side. This is a chiropractor's kid who was born like this, so I think it could happen to anybody. But I have a friend whose baby at 3 months old started physical therapy for torticollis. And down the road, if you can't correct this, they do surgery and they cut a whole bunch of stuff in the side of the baby's neck to try and get him to turn it straight again. Finn's torticollis was gone in a week. He got adjusted every day. His torticollis was gone. They need to get checked by a chiropractor. A lot of them won't need to get adjusted, but you know, if 85% of them are born with a misalignment to their atlas, they did that study in Germany in the late 1980s, and yet, you know, it's still kind of, you know, kind of strange to get your baby checked by a chiropractor. We don't think it's strange. In fact, we think it's normal enough and important enough that we come to your house and do it, you know, the day after the baby's born, free of charge, because we just think it's that important that every baby gets to start off on the right foot. All right. So obviously all of this starts with pregnancy. So nutrition issues. Address them before you're pregnant, because if you're not eating well before you're pregnant, you're not going to eat well when you're pregnant. I thought that I had some pretty decent nutrition habits when I got pregnant with Sam, but I didn't, and all I wanted was McDonald's, and that's not good for them. And I wanted a candy bar. Every day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I cried. I just wanted a candy bar. I knew it was bad for me. And so many days I showed up at the same Shell station down the street here, because I was like, forget it, I'm getting that candy bar. And I would show up to the same guy who was working there every afternoon, and I'd be like red-faced and crying and buying a Twix bar. The guy probably thought I was insane. So I started working on my nutrition a little bit with the next couple of pregnancies, and I wish I had known with the first one, or really even the first two, what I did with the third one, because I had been working with a nutritional therapist before I got pregnant with Finn. You know what I craved? I craved avocados with balsamic vinegar on them. That's a healthy pregnancy snack. It's a lot more healthy than the sausage McMuffin. And so stress, manage it before you're pregnant. In fact, it might even be hard to get pregnant if you're under too much stress. Are you in a stressful job? I was in a job where I traveled a lot when we were, starting to think about getting pregnant with Sam, which wouldn't have lended well to getting pregnant anyway. But I had to really look at that and go, can I be working this many hours, and can I be traveling from one time zone to another this often and screwing up my circadian rhythm and still get pregnant and have a healthy pregnancy? So I made the decision to leave that job and just, do it on an independent contractor basis. I know not everybody has that option. Maybe you need the maternity leave that comes with your job. But looking at the ways that you can decrease the stress in your life as much as you can, because stress can really hinder fertility, and it can make the pregnancy really hard for you and for baby. Baby needs to be bathed in cortisol all the time. Do your Kegels. Those are those exercises for your pelvic floor, and I'm telling you this not because I did such a good job doing my Kegels, because I did a terrible job doing my Kegels, and so this is one of those do as I say, not as I do things, because you don't want to pee every time you sneeze. Too much information, I'm sure, but seriously, do your Kegels. In fact, just get regular exercise in general. You're going to be so much more happy and likely to do it after your baby's born if you get more exercise. I think I got more exercise with my third than with my first two, just because I was chasing after kids more. And my weight stayed more manageable. I just felt better, did better. I would just really recommend some sort of regular exercise. Then there comes the question of a flu shot. Do you get a flu shot when you're pregnant or not? It's something the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology recommends across the board. Every pregnant woman get a flu shot. You just need to know that they've never been tested on pregnant women. I looked at all of them. I'm really nerdy, and I really like research, and I really just like to read this stuff. So I took the entire CDC recommended recommended flu shots, by trade name. And then I went to all of the websites for all the pharmaceutical companies, and I read the research that they submitted to the FDA. There's not a single pregnant woman in any of the studies. In fact, it's in the exclusion criteria. If you're pregnant, you can't be in this study. So they've never been able to say scientifically that, yes, we know that these are safe for pregnant women. They haven't said they're unsafe. We don't know. We just don't know. And so I think the question is, do you want to be a guinea pig, or would you rather not? And the decision is completely up to you, but I feel like because you're not going to get this information in your doctor's office, you need to get it somewhere, so why not for me? They don't get tested on pregnant women, so tread carefully. They're pregnancy category B and C drugs, depending on which vaccine you're looking at. All but one of them have mercury in them, so tread carefully. You're not supposed to eat too much tuna. So if you're not supposed to get mercury that way, really consider that flu shot. Before you make that decision, allow yourself to get some extra sleep. If you were a person who got 6 hours of sleep before and you were fine with it, accept the fact that you might be a 9-hour-a-night person. You might be an 11-hour-a-night person, I don't know. But allow yourself that sleep, because there is a lot going on in your body, and there is a lot of rebuilding and restoring that happens at night. It does not mean you've gotten lazy. It does not mean you're going to be like that forever. It just means that during this tender time, you need more sleep. Your body's telling you that's what it needs. And get adjusted. You know, making sure that you have a healthy spine, a healthy alignment to your spine, that your pelvis isn't doing anything too crazy. All of those things lend well to the baby getting in the right position. You want them head down, you want them face down. You know, so chiropractic care can really lend itself well to that. And it's also been known to turn a breech baby or two. So if you know somebody whose baby has turned breech and they're going, that's it, now I have to have a C-section. You know, tell them to look into chiropractic, look into acupuncture. These things have actually been known to turn a baby. We're almost done here. This is what I think should be the required reading for every pregnant woman. The hypnobirthing book. Not because I really followed the hypnobirthing model too much when I was in labor. In fact, I think at about 7 centimeters, I said, shut that lady up, shut her up now. And we turned the CD off. She kept telling me about how the clouds were changing colors. It drove me insane. But the first, like, 2/3 of this book are about the anatomy of birth. And it was really fascinating to me. It was tons of stuff I didn't know. Like, there's 2 different muscle groups in your uterus that have 2 different jobs, and what happens during a contraction and what's going on with your body. I love to know all the details, and I love to be able to visualize what's happening in a really clear scientific way. And this helped me immensely because I knew what was going on with my body, and I really appreciated that book, even if I didn't appreciate that CD while I was in labor. I appreciated it before. I was all about the clouds changing color until I was in labor. Then we switched to cello music, and all was right with the world. So Well-Adjusted Babies. This is written by a chiropractor in Australia who has quite possibly the most beautiful accent I've ever heard. She could have talked to me while I was in labor, and I would have been thrilled. She's a mom of 5 kids and a chiropractor, and just really talks about the changes that are happening to your body while you're pregnant, the changes that are going on with your baby, and it's some really powerful and really wonderful stuff, and she tells it in a way that you just want to keep reading because she's such a storyteller. But I do want to get the book on tape if it ever comes out, because hearing her say it with her beautiful accent would be so nice. And then finally, Anna Mae's Guide to Childbirth. Anna Mae is like one of the most famous midwives ever, and her Guide to Childbirth is wonderful. But I think even the real gem in this book is that the last third of it is positive births. Well, they're birth stories. You know, not every story, you know, goes quite as people want it to, but they are powerful stories of women giving birth beautifully and powerfully. And I read those stories with each of my pregnancies. I mean, even with the next 2, when I kind of knew what labor was like, I still read the stories again because they pumped me up and they got me so excited. There's a couple of them that maybe were even a little too hippy-dippy for me, which is saying something, but hang in there because I really think they're good stories. So if you're going to read anything while you're pregnant, these are the 3 things that I think are really wonderful to read. That doesn't mean there's not more out there, but you know, what to expect when you're expecting can kind of scare the heck out of you. These are ones that are going to really empower you. All right, so build your birth confidence. We're about to our last slide here. These are ways that I think you build your birth confidence during a pregnancy. Surround yourself with positive birth stories, whether it's Anna Mae's book, your girlfriends that have had good experiences, even your girlfriends who haven't had their best experience but understand that it's not their job to push their story on you or scare you. Surround yourself with those positive stories and be careful about how you spend your time. If Aunt Nancy likes to tell you every time how, boy, your baby looks really big and your pelvis looks really small, maybe you stop hanging out with Aunt Nancy just a little bit toward the ends of the birth, because maybe you don't need Aunt Nancy's hand quite that much. Do the birth affirmations. I'm going to send them with you today, and you could even make up your own, but you know, things that you tell yourself that remind you that, hey, this really is going to be okay. Attend a good birth class. If you have any questions about that afterward, talk to me, or we're actually going to have a midwife here at the end who can answer some questions about that. She'll probably know good birth classes too. Come to our Pathways group. We have a group of moms that meets up once a month, and about quarterly we do a birth stories day. So if people need to come and get some help and encouragement with maybe reframing a story that is not serving them very well anymore, that can happen in that setting. Or you know, we can build each other up with stories of, hey, you're going to be able to do this. And ask me more about that if you want. We meet on the second Tuesday of each month here. It's usually not as hot in here when we meet. I'm not really sure what's going on tonight. And then follow the right groups on social media. You're going to have a lot of options for people you can read on Facebook and you can see on Instagram. A few really good ones are Pathways to Family Wellness. They have a lot of great content, a lot of great bits and pieces about birth. There's a Facebook page called The Business of Baby that I really enjoy that I think kind of sheds some light into some of those dark corners of our healthcare system. And then Birth Without Fear is another really great one. If you search that hashtag on Instagram, you're going to see some really wonderful things, women really being confident and coming into their own as they birth their babies. So leave here today knowing this, that you are enough. You're enough. And no matter how your birth ends, you're enough. There are some births that end not the way we planned them to, but you are enough. And you are stronger than you think. If you're like me and you think that you need to do a home birth simply because you're a wimp, you're not. You're not. And you were made strong and you were made fierce. You were made strong enough for this and fierce enough to withstand even when it gets tough. And don't doubt how capable you are because you make people, and that's a pretty daunting task. So please leave knowing those things about yourself.